What's going on, everybody? My name is Hongos. I'm a photographer and web video producer. In this video, I have tried out Final Cut Pro for the past few weeks, and I have to say, I cannot continue using Final Cut Pro. But before you click away from this video, here are my reasons why. Before I get started, I want to say that this video will be broken into the stuff I enjoyed and the stuff that, although small, became a really big issue with me. And before we even get started, on those two sections, I want to start off with this quote. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. This was a quote by Marshall McLuhan, who is a theoretical media theorist, and this quote became really relevant and important as I made my decisions and I was looking into Final Cut. And I want you to keep that in the back of your head as I do make my review about this video as we head on to our conclusion. So let's get started. First off, let's talk about that importing screen. I really loved the way that the importing was set up. It made me realize that when it came to importing, I'm quite messy with my information as I throw it into the project, but the importing screen on Final Cut allowed me to double check everything. Now, in a sense, as we move through this review, I realized that I'm talking a lot about user interface, and user interface within Premiere and Final Cut is extremely different. And I realized this as I was moving things, as I was moving one thing from another, as I was doing certain actions that I kind of struggled with Premiere. Final Cut really improved on those. And user interface is one of those things that the moment you do something faster one way, you don't want to go back to the other. So for example, the bin in Premiere Pro is extremely messy. It gets all over the place. I've tried many ways of trying to import it and organize my footage, but it's always really messy, and Final Cut fixes that by putting everything by date, and it makes it extremely easy to find. Now, we're also gonna talk about Premiere and Final Cut's way of viewing footage. Now, one thing that I realized and said that I really enjoyed about Premiere Pro was my ability to see my preview and my project at the same time. However, I realized that this is one of those things where you don't intentionally mean to find it, but you find it. And I find myself being even more productive when I was just looking at one screen. I wasn't thinking about what to do with the next clip. I would just focus on that one clip. So it's one of those things that I hope to change up when I move back to Premiere. When it came to managing audio, it's one of those things that if you know how to do it in one program, you can do it in the other. And audio was one of those things I really didn't have to struggle. I knew what I was doing. Everything was exactly the same when it came to Final Cut and Premiere. So there wasn't too much Googling, and it was just great to know that I could move as fast in Final Cut and in Premiere. Now let's talk about graphic stocks, 3D motion tracking, all these sort of important key little things that make a video come together. I'll say that the pre-built stuff within Final Cut is so freaking good. None of that Comic Sans shit that freaking Premiere gives you for some odd reason, but it's great, it's usable, it's really great looking, and I personally found that I was using them quite a bit. All the stuff that I use within Premiere, I found online, and it feels like this is one of those things that Premiere should have, and it should be really good, but it's not. Lastly, let's talk about this thing called optimization. Optimization. It's something that everybody talks about when they're moving from Premiere to Final Cut. And I realized how fast, how agile, this isn't a Pokemon, but how great it was for the Mac. And that's because it's designed for the Mac ecosystem. By the time that I was done editing, I could render out, and within minutes, I could have it up on YouTube. Now, rendering takes a while, uploading takes a while, and this saved me so much time and speed, and it was just amazing. But although I fell in love with the user interface, the speed, I could not fully fall in love with Final Cut, and here's why. So these are the things I didn't really enjoy about Final Cut. The most important and the thing that I was worried the most about were keyboard shortcuts. I know that you can personally remap them and just kind of make it look like Premiere, but it didn't feel like Premiere, and I wanted to do an out-of-the-box sort of thing. And I realized how slow I was getting because these keyboard shortcuts weren't aligned. It was so heavily ingrained into me that I just could not fix it, and I still make mistakes even after hours of using it. When it came to color coding, so just color coding each piece of footage, I realized, not color grading, color coding. So I usually make something blue, like the A roll, B roll might be red, orange might be like the slow-mo stuff, and all these like little things that I found I was using in Premiere did not transcend into Final Cut. But we also had to move on to less about the software and a little bit more about the hardware. because it felt like I was using the trackpad a lot more. And I'm personally not a fan of the trackpad when it came to these pieces of software. When I was using it, it felt like I was losing a lot of my spots within viewing the final cut footage. I really used a lot of the levels when it came to audio. So I was losing a lot of the peaking points. So like when I clap like this in order to get the video started, I was losing that so much, and it just kept on slowing me down. Changing frame rates was also one of those things. I tried to make something slow motion, and it just became essentially more difficult. I wasn't able to remove the clip from the audio without taking both and then delatching it or detaching it from it. So I was, again, losing more time. The adjustment layers are just so important to me, and for some reason within this version of Final Cut there is no adjustment layer. I have to go through like this giant step in order to make an adjustment layer, and I didn't want to. It just did not feel natural. It just came down to that. Also, LUT loading was really awful, and I could not control the LUT except for the level of intensity, and I just did not find that useful or resourceful. And one final piece of hardware, I realized that my mouse and just so much, so when I like a program, I really revolve the hardware around it, and that included the mouse. The MX Master Mouse S2 is programmed for Premiere, and it's really great, and it saves me a lot of time. So the things that I thought I was losing time on were actually really big time savers, especially when it came to that mouse. There's this middle point, the magnetic timeline. I'm still indifferent about it just because it saved me so much time, because I didn't have to ripple delete so much, and stuff would just keep on moving back, and I didn't lose any time, and it was great. But at the same time, there were certain times where it would just get so in the way, and I know you can turn it off, but I wanted the full experience of the magnetic timeline, and it wasn't really working out. In the finale, what is my conclusion? And I think my conclusion is I really loved it, but it's not for me. And I say this because we have to reroute back into that quote of, do the tools shape us or do we shape the tools? And I think here the tool shaped me, and that's because I've been a part of the Adobe ecosystem since I first started being a photographer. Since I started doing this, since I started being a creative, they just made me what I am. Premiere Pro is no different, and I love the Adobe ecosystem. They might not do certain things right, like rendering and like uploading to YouTube, but I know it inside and out. I know what I want to do, and there's a plethora of tutorials. It's an industry standard, and no matter what you use, you should be great at it, and I'm great with Premiere, and that's all I have to say. I'm staying with Premiere. I'm not switching. It's great, but it's not for me. I hope that you enjoyed what I said. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you will try out Final Cut, because I'm so happy I tried out the trial and not the full thing. But anyways, thank you so much for your time and your attention. My name is amoong, and I'll catch you in the next one.